Hello, and welcome everybody to the next episode of the Average American Podcast. I'm your host, Sergey. In this episode, I will talk about the role of artificial intelligence in the modern software development, the revolution that it brought on, the reality, and of course, the future of coding. Artificial intelligence has swiftly entered the world of software development in the last, I would say, just few years. It turned sci-fi predictions into everyday tools. Developers today can code side by side with AI helpers like GitHub Copilot, OpenAI Codex, Amazon Code Whisperer Q, and Tabnai. These AI pair programmers suggest lines of code, whole functions, entire algorithms, or even complete programs based on natural language prompts or the code context or specific instructions. The result is a dramatic shift in how software is written. It raises the excitement about boosted productivity and, of course, a little bit of an anxiety about what it means for human programmers. In this podcast, we'll explore recent findings on AI code productivity. We're going to fact check a few claims like AI writes all the code, examine how companies and developers are adapting or maladapting, consider the impact on jobs, especially for newcomers, and look ahead where this AI coding journey might take us in the next few years. Why did I pick this topic? Is because it's near and dear to my heart. I've been programming for more than 40 years on and off, and I've been a professional developer for almost 30 years. And I started using GitHub Copilot a little over a year ago, full-time in my job, and I really love it. I would say that it really contributes to a joyful experience for me at work. First of all, let's talk a little bit about productivity and what impact artificial intelligence had on productivity. AI coding assistants are changing the developer workflow. Rather than writing every line of code from scratch, as maybe some articles suggest, programmers instead can accept AI suggested code whole or in just part, or have AI generate boilerplate or repetitive sections, or just contribute to a partial line. Recent studies show this can significantly speed up certain coding tasks. For example, an experiment at GitHub found that developers that use GitHub Copilot completed tasks 55% faster than those without it. They actually published that study qualifying GitHub Copilot impact on developer productivity and happiness, and you can read those findings for yourself. The AI doesn't magically do the job alone, of course, but it does accelerate the productivity. Developers report that tools like Copilot, and by developers, I would do the same thing. They help them stay in the flow and reduce mental effort of repetitive tasks. And you can, again, refer to the same Copilot study. Crucially, AI assistance tends to augment human work rather than replace it. And that is my experience as well in over a year. In GitHub studies, programmers accepted roughly about 30% of Copilot's code suggestions on average. From my personal experience, I would say it's a little bit lower, but it may depend on complexity of work. And in the past year, my work has been extremely complicated. In other words, for every 10 ideas that AI offers, 3 or maybe 2 or 1 used, while the rest are just modified or just discarded completely. A majority of developers in one enterprise study reported committing and merging AI-suggested code into their project. Roughly 1/3 said that AI contributes quite a bit to their code, and only 10% said not at all. Again, the same GitHub study. Beyond Copilot, other AI coding tools show somewhat similar trend. Tab 9, an early AI code completer, and Amazon Code Whisperer Q both aim to boost productivity in a comparable range. Independent analyses and surveys from McKinsey and Gartner have suggested productivity gains higher than that. OpenAI's Codex model, which powers Copilot and many other tools, set the stage by demonstrating that generative AI can turn natural language instructions into working code. This doesn't mean, of course, AI handles the entire software project autonomously, but it can generate parts of the code, sometimes small, sometimes larger, but in fact it still participates in the development process. Developers like me often like it to have an autocomplete on steroids, or an intern sometimes that writes some draft code, but I would be more inclined to compare Copilot to more of a pair programmer or an assistant, a helpful assistant. Crucially, these AI tools seem to have bigger impact on mundane or simple, you would say, coding tasks. Some of those could be writing unit tests, and I myself do that quite a bit. I ask Copilot after I generate a code file, ask it to write some tests. And sometimes it does pretty good job, sometimes a little worse, but it definitely improves my productivity. When it comes to enjoyment on coding, 9 out of 10 developers in a trial said that they enjoyed their work more with Copilot assistance. Again, I refer to the same survey. I am honestly in the same boat, and I used, when I advocated to my boss to purchase Copilot for me, or keep the license more precisely after a pilot program, I said that it just brings a little more joy into my life at work. How much code is AI writing really? That is a very interesting question, because the numbers vary from 0 to 100% literally. There have been some eye-catching claims in media, but the reality, I feel, is much more mundane. You might have heard bold statements like AI writes 90% of code or will write 100% of code. Let's drill a little bit deeper into superfluous claims and mundane reality. First of all, AI writes all the code claim, more of a thought experiment or maybe a bold prediction. It was made by Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei. He said that in a few months, 90% of code will be written by AI and nearly 100% in a year. Essentially, he predicted a near future, very near future, where human programmers are barely needing to write any code because AI will do most of the work. On developer forum, long-term coders chuckled that the only people that believe this are the ones who don't actually write code. And I would be probably in the same camp. Even Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux and Git software system, weighed in. He said, today's AI tech is 90% marketing and 10% factual reality. In other words, grand claims about total automations are 90% removed from reality. I would like to weigh in from my personal experience. I feel like saying that 10% of code is written by AI. In some cases, for complex coding tasks, I would say that could be correct. But I would say in some cases, 30% is also a reality, in my personal experience. But 90% to me is just simply unrealistic for any kind of complexity, for any kind of software that is more than trivial. I just think, at least today, that's not a reality. The claim that AI writes 25% of Google code, however, has some factual basis. It was made by Sundar Pichai, or Google CEO, in 2024. He said in the last quarter of new code that Google was generated, but 25% was generated by AI. Of course, human engineers reviewed and accepted it, but nonetheless, that's the roughly a share of code that was checked in at Google. To clarify, of course, that doesn't mean that 25% of Google code base is magically auto-generated overnight. It refers purely to new contributed code written in one quarter without any qualification of what kind of software it was written to was generated by AI. So the reality is that AI can generate sizable chunks of code, but human oversight and human integration into the process remains essential. And that is my experience as well. Even at Google, the AI written code must be checked in, it must be verified by programmers, and has to go through code reviews, which is a standard process in which other developers look at a particular developer's contribution before the code is approved and merged. One Google engineer humorously remarked that claiming 25% of code is AI generated is like saying a painting is 25% created by a paintbrush. The tool is doing the strokes, but the artist guides the tool. In fact, another developer quipped that AI's contribution is more like a quarter of a line at a time rather than the entire software. Outside of Google, GitHub CEO Thomas Dohmke has shared that among developers using Copilot, about 40% of them say that code is AI generated. Let me rephrase that. About 40% of the code they end up checking in is AI generated. Yet, nonetheless, Dohmke is quick to add that AI doesn't replace developers. Instead, he envisions sooner rather than later, 80% of code is going to be written by Copilot. That doesn't mean the developer is going to be replaced. That means the developer has more time to focus on the 20% of code that they write. You can read about those quotes online if you'd like. In summary, AI is becoming a powerful co-author in software projects, but not the author. Claims that AI is writing all the code by itself, in my opinion, are completely overblown. Currently, we see scenarios when AI is contributing maybe 10, maybe 30, maybe 50% of code in some organizations on some project. However, even those pushing the tech, like GitHub CEO, emphasize that future engineers will be conductors of an AI orchestra, directing in what code to generate and focusing their efforts on tricky percent that AI would struggle to accomplish. Now let's talk a little bit about big tech and how they embrace AI-generated development process. Perhaps the strongest evidence that AI-assisted coding is here to stay is to observe how aggressively major tech companies adopted these tools. We already heard Google headline. Google has built its own internal code-generating AI to help their engineers. The message from Google leadership is clear. AI is a standard part of a developer toolkit, and it improves productivity. Google's even reorganized divisions to better integrate AI across all the departments. Microsoft similarly has woven AI into its software engineering culture. As the owner of GitHub, Microsoft was an early mover with the Copilot and now offers it to its own developers and customers through tools like Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. Microsoft Satya Nadella has referred to Copilot as the new pair programmer for every developer. And the company itself reported internal productivity gains from its usage. In fact, GitHub under Microsoft announced that over 50,000 organizations has purchased Copilot by 2023. Microsoft technical fellows have hinted that a large fraction of code being written by their developers is now AI suggested. It's not surprising. Microsoft and OpenAI are closely aligned, with OpenAI's Codex and GPT-4 models powering many of these coding features. The vision from Microsoft's side is that mundane coding will be largely AI automated, allowing human developers to focus on critical architecture and more innovative, harder to predict code. OpenAI's role in all this is foundational. They created Codex, the engine that essentially kicked off all AI encoding movement in 2021. OpenAI's newer models like GPT-4 and later have even stronger coding abilities. They can not only autocomplete code, but they can debug, explain code, document code, and translate between programming languages. OpenAI has been eating its own dog food too, using AI internally to assist in writing code for its own systems. The influence of OpenAI research is evident. Both Google and Microsoft have licensed and built upon OpenAI's models. And OpenAI continues to push the envelope. For instance, they introduce features where you can have a conversational assistant directly write and modify code snippets on your behalf. All this shows that Silicon Valley is betting big on AI-driven software development. Other tech giants are on board as well. Amazon launched Code Whisperer, which I think they renamed to Q. They tailor into the cloud and AI-specific development in AWS-related features. Meta, or Facebook, also open-sourced a code-generating model that they called Code Llama, signaling they too see these models as critical and perhaps wanted to open-source community to have an alternative. IBM's been using AI as well. What is striking that across these companies, the narrative is largely positive. AI productivity is an enhancer and not a job killer. It's worth noting that some of these upbeat messages also serve to calm fears. After all, morale would sink if every developer thought that their job was on the line. However, some industry insiders acknowledge that there is a more pragmatic angle these companies pursue. If a team of 20 developers can accomplish what used to take 15, companies might slow down hiring for certain developer roles. We haven't seen dramatic layoffs, however, so maybe those fears are overblown as well. However, one leaked internal memo in a big tech firm suggested that using Copilot could allow them to meet goals with a smaller team, potentially reallocating engineers to other projects or maybe stop hiring. So while big tech's official stance is AI helps developers shine, it's kind of clear that efficiency gains are being watched very closely by management, and the future decisions regarding hiring or projects to take on may differ from what we are hearing today. Now I want to talk about developers' perspective instead of management. Is AI a job killer or productivity booster, or is it both? So what do rank-and-file developers like me make of all of that? Understandably, there is a mix of enthusiasm and concern. If you ask me personally, I'm more enthusiastic and a lot less concerned. Many developers love these tools, me included. As we noted before, a large majority feels more productive and more satisfied. Again, I'm in the same boat. The AI can act like a super smart colleague who is always available to brainstorm with you, to help you out, to write some of the boring code, to help you generate tests. This has led to genuine fear among some developers. If they don't adopt AI, they'll fall behind their peers that do. In that sense, developers see AI as a competitive advantage for individual productivity. I'm gonna, again, talk about my own personal experience. I feel exactly the same way. So to me, it falls in line with why would you want to not use a hammer when one available if you want to nail something? It just doesn't really make sense. So if you have an additional tool to make you more productive, to benefit your company, which in turn will undoubtedly benefit you. Why not do that? However, I think it would be stupid if we ignore the obvious pink elephant in the room, and the question would be, will AI replace me? While no mass displacement of development has happened yet, some do worry. They point out how often AI coding assistants still make mistakes, however. They produce code that may not compile. I have seen that myself. It may solve the wrong problem. It may not create tasks like they should be created. And there could always be bugs. And the key part there is to understand where is the magic of this code. So the reason AI can produce code is because that AI ingested billions of lines of code from publicly available code on GitHub. That's how it got trained. That code was written by humans, and humans make mistakes. Therefore, AI trained on their code will also make mistakes. Some developers know the junior level tasks are already being handled by AI. I would say to some extent is probably better. And that's how I look at what I read in the news. From the management perspective, companies are indeed eyeing productivity metrics. If a team's output jumps with AI assistant, a manager could interpret that in two ways. Great, we can do more than we ever did before with the same staff, or maybe we can handle workload with fewer people and stick to the same workload. So far, the tech industry is still hungry for talent because there is a lot more software to write than there are developers available to do the job. A 2024 survey of US hiring managers delivered a wake-up call, however. 78% of them said they expect AI will lead to layoffs of recent college graduates in entry-level roles in their organizations. More than 2/3 said that AI can do work of a new graduate or an intern effectively. None of those things, in my opinion, are true, at least not 100% true. But what is true, that the same staff, when introduced to AI, can do more work, and some of that work would be mundane work that they did before. So I feel like it's more precisely to say that they can do more work with the same staff, not that they're going to lay people off en masse. At the same time, many tech leaders insist that human developers are indispensable. AI can crank out some code, but decide what code to write and where and why, still a human decision. One insightful analysis put it this way: there is far more to software development than just coding. Engineers also spend time gathering requirements, designing system architecture, handling the integrations, working on deployments, and many, many other tasks. Today's AI may have very little understanding of a company's broader objectives and nuanced trade-offs in a complex system. In fact, some argue AI will ultimately create more demand for developers. The logic follows the economic principle. If software becomes faster and cheaper to produce because of AI, then companies will, instead of laying people off, they will build even more software. This could mean more projects, more code, thus more developers to oversee the efforts. This to me seems just like another way the humans automate certain tasks. And we have seen that in the past. When high-level programming languages came out, they made development faster than it was before with low-level languages like C. And as a result, we ended up with more programmers, not fewer, because software literally is eating the world and is automating every human task possible. AI could similarly expand the pie. Every company might embark on new initiatives that were not feasible before. Now that one developer works 30% more efficiently, you could do 30% more work. Therefore, AI is a job enabler, not a job destroyer. Having said that, I'm going to add my twist on top of some of these studies. And what I would say is that, yes, I feel like qualified, smart developers who also work hard are going to be in more demand. On the other hand, developers with lower skill set who are not striving to be the best possible developer, I feel like some layoffs for them are inevitable. Now, if we shift from simply attitude toward entry-level developers, everyone I know at some point or another was an entry-level developer. And that group is feeling particularly anxious about these trends in entry-level software tasks. Breaking into a software career has always meant doing a fair share of grunt work. Writing simpler tasks, maybe writing some tests, maybe fixing minor bugs, maybe even testing. In other words, learning the rope under a mentorship of a senior colleague. But if AI is taking over the simple stuff, what does that mean for someone fresh out of college or a coding bootcamp? There are a few signals that are somewhat troubling. As mentioned, many hiring managers predict a reduction in internships and junior roles. In fact, 63% of employers who offered fewer internships than before cited AI as a reason. And that was in a different report. AI could replace some interns and new grads. From new graduates' point of view, this raises the bar to land that first job. We are already seeing anecdotes like a search of Salesforce job site in early 2025 finding almost no software engineering roles labeled as new grad or entry level. Some industry analysts talk about a quiet erosion of entry level and maybe somewhat higher positions, a hollowing out of the bottom rungs of the career ladder. The fear is that if fewer people get that first job, there will be fewer seasoned developers a decade from today. But I feel like it's not all doom and gloom. Adaptation is possible and is desired and is necessary. And it is already happening. What companies want and need is an entry-level developers with a different skill profile, with a profile that includes AI as a core skill set. Almost 95% of hiring managers said they're more likely to hire a recent graduate who has experience with AI tools and understands how to use AI at work. It's no longer just about knowing how to code in Java or C# or Python. It's about knowing how to collaborate with AI to be more productive. In practical terms, this means new grads should learn how to prompt these coding assistants effectively, how to verify and test and understand AI-generated code, how to quickly fix errors that AI will inevitably make. Rather than eliminating entry-level people, I feel like the roles will be redefined. Junior developers might spend relatively less time writing trivial code, but more time in code review, in testing, and in guiding AI to create certain coding functions or systems that maybe still not as complicated. There might be tasks with guiding AI systems, for example, working on prompt engineering for AI to generate code. Core software engineering fundamentals like algorithms and data structure and architecture, debugging and troubleshooting are still critical and crucial, and they're not going anywhere. AI India's tech leader, Sundar Pichai, hinted, aspiring coders should focus on skills that are complemental to AI. the ability to prompt AI to complete your job. It's worth noting there is some precedent of this kind of shift. Years ago, software companies used to hire large teams of quality assurance manual testers. Many entry-level folks starting in QA. I would say that for the first 3 months of my first job, while I was still in college, I was doing QA before shifting to programming. With the rise of automated testing tools, a lot of these manual testing jobs are slowly disappearing, or more precisely, they're evolving into some amount of software development, with or without AI, to create scripts to test the software. For new computer science graduates, the job prospects aren't vanishing, but they are changing. The advice from me would be embrace AI and don't fight it. Students and junior devs who add AI-based development to their skill set and their resume are learning valuable tools. They can act as a multiplier, the skills, on a team's output from day one. In contrast, those who ignore AI or make comments like, I don't want to steal somebody else's code, they will find themselves edged out by the peers who are simply smarter when it comes to working side by side with AI. Still, it would be remiss not to acknowledge some concerns. If companies aren't careful, cutting down on junior hiring could lead to a huge generation gap in expertise in 10 or 20 years, and you won't be able to find anybody who would do a more complex work such as troubleshoot. Let's look a little bit at a road ahead. Where does AI fit in software development in the near future? Let's say a few years to maybe a decade. All signs point out that AI is becoming an everyday part of software development process to an even greater degree than now. It's similar to how version control or Stack Overflow became ubiquitous in the last 20 years. Same, I feel like, will happen to AI. Here are a few trends I would like to point out based on what I know by working in the industry. AI is a coding co-pilot, not autopilot. Despite the rapid improvements in AI, I would say that human developers will stay in the driver's seat at high demand for the foreseeable future. AI will increasingly handle more and more simpler code and even generate some complex algorithm on demand. But human will guide AI what to build, how to build it, and more importantly, review and validate all the code that is AI generated. The focus of a developer's job will shift toward architecture, intent, verification, and talking to a business owner. Microsoft CTO Kevin Scott mused that developers will become more like editors or coaches for AI, overseeing potentially multiple code-generated agents. We'll likely see job posting explicitly looking for skills like coding, AI prompt engineering, or AI-assisted development, as companies will continue to seek people who know how to leverage AI tools effectively. Entry-level positions are undoubtedly going to evolve. The entry-level coding position won't disappear, of course, but they will change shape. Newcomers might write less trivial code and instead start on performing code reviews on AI output, maybe writing tests or writing prompts. As one report advised, future coders will need strong skills in guiding AI systems, validating AI output, and troubleshooting complex issues that are currently beyond AI reach. The concept of a one-person software development team might become possible. There is talk that an individual developer with enough AI firepower could create something that previously required a giant startup. OpenAI Sam Altman even speculated about possibility of one-person billion-dollar startup thanks to AI coding assistance. I feel like that's an exaggeration, at least today. But is it completely out of realm of possibility? I don't think so. Not if you look beyond just a few years. What we'll also see as a trend is a higher AI code contribution. Technically, we can expect the percentage of code written by AI to creep slowly upward. GitHub CEO predicted Copilot might write 80% of code sooner rather than later. You can read about that quote on your own. 80% in a year, I would say no way. But I think I would be hard pressed to make a prediction where AI is going to be in our industry in a decade. I don't think anybody would know. It's just so hard to imagine based on rapid improvements we have seen in just 4 years. This could happen through more advanced models, perhaps, trained specifically on companies' internal code base. The future is there for us to ponder. And then I want to talk about what we will also see is probably new tools. The software development process itself could be reimagined. We already see different integrated development environments and coder extensions where you can have a chat-like interface with AI that remembers your entire project. This could evolve into AI agents that monitor your code base continuously, suggesting improvements, doing pull requests completely on their own. The development cycle could become much tighter and more automated, with humans supervising multiple AI agent tools that are working autonomously. Then I think we need to talk about the impact of AI on quality and maintenance. One open question is how AI-generated code will fare in the long run. Some veteran engineers worry about maintainability. If AI writes a lot of code, how will people understand it when they need to troubleshoot it? There is a risk of spaghetti code, some say. Companies will have to enforce certain standards. Same standards they probably have today for human developers, I think they will have to create some standards for AI. Then I think what I want to muse about is how job market will shift. In terms of job, many forecasts, such as World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report, suggest that while some programming roles will be cannibalized by automation, new jobs will emerge. We might see more jobs for AI software strategist or AI automation engineer, which are not about writing application code per se, but about building the AI systems that write code. The net number of developers' jobs probably won't drop. But those engineers who embrace AI and work in the future will likely need to have much broader skill set. Hiring might favor developers who are more versatile. You might think of terms generalist and specialist. Generalists can do many tasks. Specialists can do one. And what we're going to see likely, in my opinion, is that you're going to have a rise of generalist developers, but also specialist developers whose primary skill set is training AI. And the other thing that I've been doing myself for years that I want to mention is continuous learning. In our industry, you just can't escape it. If you're not studying on your own outside of the job, you're going to fall behind. That is just the life of a developer, and AI simply puts more focus on it. The landscape of AI models is evolving as well so fast, and it's improving and it's closing the gap between a human developer and AI developers. Developers might have to choose or even fine-tune their own AI tools in the future. To wrap it up, the next few years in software development will be a balancing act, embracing the incredible productivity boosts from AI while managing the challenges and ensuring humans stay in control of quality and strategic direction. The development team of, say, 2028 might consist of fewer entry-level coders banging out boilerplate code, but more AI-augmented engineers. Those engineers might each be supercharged, effectively doing the work of multiple people thanks to AI assistance. It's the future where coding will look more like collaboration between a human and a machine, perhaps to the point that the line between the two would be blurred. One thing is almost certain. Software has been eating the world, and this will only accelerate as AI helps cook the meal. We'll see the explosion of software in areas that haven't been automated yet, because AI will lower the cost and the skill barrier to develop custom solutions. So if you're a developer or an aspiring developer, it's an exciting time. There are more tools at your disposal than ever. The key is to adapt and leverage AI as your ally. As we've explored, those who do so are likely to be more productive and valuable than ever, whereas those who stick to purely manual coding might find themselves reminiscent of the old era. The story of AI in software development is just beginning, but it's beginning at neck-breaking speed. Developers, however, will be right at the center of the story, not replaced by the narrative, but co-authoring it. Let me leave you with a few closing thoughts. In this episode, we journeyed through the landscape of AI's impact on coding, from real productivity statistics and corporate adoption to the workforce implications and forecasts for the future. The narrative that emerges is the one of transformation, not extinction. AI is rewriting some of the rules of software engineering, but it's also rewriting the job description of a software developer in real time. 5 years from now or 10 years from now, the day-to-day activities of a coder will likely be very different, perhaps filled with conversation with AI assistants, yet the core mission remains the same. We're solving human problems with technology. For listeners out there who code or are learning to code, the takeaway is to stay curious and open-minded. These AI tools are like a new kind of a programming language. Once you learn to speak it, you can accomplish amazing things. And for those worried about their future job prospects, remember that historically, automation in tech creates new opportunities, even as it closes old ones. The story of AI in development isn't a simple one of a replacement. It's a story of collaboration, augmentation, and humans thriving with the new skills. As we sign off, consider this perspective. In the future, saying AI wrote this code will be as normal as saying I used a library or a framework to write this code. It will be just another part of how software gets made. And just as using libraries freed us from reinventing the wheel, using AI will free us from doing a lot of grunt work. The human developer, with creativity, intuition, and deep understanding, will remain in charge of defining the wheel itself. Stay tuned as we continue to track this evolving synergy between developers and AI. The tools will change, the workflows will adapt, but the goal remains building great software for humans. And on that optimistic note, I want to thank you for listening to this deep dive into the impact of AI in software development. Till next time, happy coding, and don't forget to say hello to your AI assistant.